Mrs. Plenda here again, and today we're going to talk about solving multi-step equations and inequalities. We're going to take the skills that we've already learned, our simplifying of expressions, and our solving two-step equations and inequalities, and we're going to put those together all in one problem. So let's get started. So the first thing that we want to remember about what we're doing is that when we are simplifying, we're doing two things. We're combining our like terms, making sure that the letters that are all the same go together, and then our numbers are in a different pile. And then we're also taking care of our groups, usually by distributing, sometimes by dividing, so that we don't have parentheses. Okay? The other thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is when we were solving our two-step inequalities and equations, we were using our inverse operations. We're going to do the same thing. And when we use those inverse operations, the opposite of what we see, we have to make sure that they are used on each side of the equals or inequality sign. And of course, once we get to our answer, it's always a good idea to check our work. So if we have time for that, we should do that too. You can absolutely use a calculator to help you check your work too. So let's jump right in. Here's our first couple of problems. What we have here are an equation and an inequality where we need to make sure that we are combining our like terms. So I have my equation here where I have 8a and 6a as my like terms. So I'm going to go ahead and combine those. Notice it's minus 6a, so that means 8a minus 6a is 2a. Still have the 1, it wasn't like, so it stays separate. And then I've got a nice little two-step equation I can solve. So since it says plus 1, I'm going to go ahead and subtract 1 on both sides of the equals. Now I have 2a is equal to 2. I will divide by 2 on both sides of the equals, and that gives me a is equal to 1. Now I should be able to take that 1, put it back in for each a, and make sure that this works out. So 8 times 1 would give me 8. 8 plus 1 is 9. Negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. 9 minus 6 is 3. It all works out, okay? And you can absolutely use a calculator to help you check your work on those. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our inequality on the other side. Again, I see that I have some like terms, but instead of terms with letters, it's just our numbers. So I've got negative 7 plus 5, which are just numbers. We can always combine those. So negative 7 plus 5 gives me negative 2. I still have the 22 is less than negative 8x. We haven't done anything with that, so we have to make sure we bring it along with us as we go through the problem. And now it's just a two-step inequality. So I'll do the opposite of what I see. I see minus 2, so I will add 2. Now I have 24 is less than negative 8x. Because the 8 is multiplying with the x, I will divide, and since it's negative, I divide by that negative. Because it's a negative I'm dividing by, it flips all my signs, including my inequality sign. So now I have negative 3 is greater than x, which is now positive. And because it's an inequality, I should always think about graphing it. It's usually easier to graph these if my x is on the left, so I'm going to go ahead and flip my statement here on the bottom around. My original one said that the x is the smaller value, so I have to make sure that my inequality continues to say that. The x is the smaller part, the negative 3 is the bigger part. And when I go ahead and write my my number line, for this inequality, I'm going to go ahead and put negative 3 in the middle. Negative 2 is bigger. Negative 4 is smaller. Because my x is less than negative 3, it is not equal to negative 3. I'm going to go ahead and have an open circle for this. So I will have an open circle on that 3. The x is smaller, so it will go to the left, right? The x is less, so I go to the left to the lower values. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple more. So here we have just equations. The one on the left has some parentheses we'll need to take care of, and the one on the right has parentheses plus a little bit more. So we're going to go ahead and do these now. The one on the left we'll do first. I've got that negative 8. We can divide it off. We can also distribute it. I'm going to go ahead and divide it off to see how that works for us this time, because the 8 is multiplying with the parentheses. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. And I will divide on both sides. So multiplying 8 and dividing by 8 are inverses. That means I just have 1. So now I've got 1 minus 7x over there. And negative 288 divided by negative 8. Well, let's see, negative 8 goes into 28 3 times 4 left over, 48. We're looking at 36. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. There we go. All right, now we've got a two-step problem, real easy to solve. I do the opposite of what I see. This first part with the 1 is a little bit tricky because it's a positive 1. I want to subtract 1 because I'm looking to zero it out. So I will subtract 1 on this side as well. Now I don't have any more 1. I just have negative 7x is equal to 35. Because the negative 7 is multiplying with the x, I do the opposite and divide on both sides. And now I have x is equal to negative 5. And we should check that in our calculators to make sure everything comes out the way it should. Now let's take a look at our one on the right, which is a little bit more complicated. So we want to make sure, again, we're getting rid of these parentheses. Now we can't divide this 5 off because in order to be able to go through the whole problem, I'd have to divide the entire side by 5, which means I'd have 4/5 m over here, which is just kind of ugly to work with. We don't really want to do that if we can help it. So we're going to distribute this 5 instead. So 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 times 7 is 35. We still have our 4m on the front, and it's all equal to 200. There we go. Now I have some like terms I want to put together. 4m plus 35m gives me 39m. We still have our plus 5, and that's all equal to 200. And now we've got a two-step to solve. So I'll use my inverses. I will subtract 5 because I see plus 5. That means I now have 39m is equal to 195. And we will divide by 39. And 39 goes into 195 5 times. There we go. M is equal to 5. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our inequalities. All right, we're gonna do these the same way. We're making sure that we are using our inverse operations and we are simplifying. So for this one, since I divided it off last time, this time I'm going to distribute the outside number. So I'm going to take this negative 3 and distribute it in. So negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Don't forget your x. And that's all greater than 93. I don't have any like terms, so I'm ready to solve using my inverses. Because I see negative 3, I will add 3 because I'm looking to make it 0. Now I have negative 12x is greater than 96. I'm going to divide by the negative 12 because I'm dividing by a negative number. That's going to flip all my signs, including my inequality. So now I have x is less than 96 divided by negative 12 is negative 8. Okay. So because it's an inequality, we should always graph it. So let's get a nice little number line going on. We're going to put our negative 8 in the middle. Negative 7 is bigger. Negative 9 is smaller. And because my x is less than 8, or negative 8 rather, that means that I will have an open circle. It's not equal to 8, it's less than. And because it's less than, my arrow goes to the left to the lower values. Less than takes us left to the lower values. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our problem on the right. For this one, again, we want to make sure that we are distributing to get rid of these parentheses. So I'm going to take that negative 6 and multiply it with the 3. That gives me negative 18. I will take the negative 6 and multiply it with negative 2. Negative times a negative gives me a positive. Don't forget your k. I haven't done anything to the rest of the problem, so I'm rewriting it so I don't forget. And there's my negative 2. There we go. Now we're looking for those like terms to combine. Negative 2 and negative 18 are just numbers. We can always combine those. Two negatives take us very far negative, so now we're at negative 20 plus 12k. And our negative 104 is still over here. There we go. Now I've got a two-step problem we can solve with our inverse operations. Because it is minus 20, I will go ahead and add 20 to make that 0. Because we are adding to a negative, it is now less negative, so we're only at negative 84 now, is less than 12k. Our last step is to go ahead and divide by 12 on both sides. Because the 12 is not negative, we will not change the sign. And negative 84 divided by 12 is negative 7, is less than k. So since k is my bigger piece, when I go ahead and draw my number line here, I'm going to have negative 7 in the middle. Negative 6 is bigger. Negative 8 is smaller. And because my k is bigger than negative 7, it is not equal to, it is bigger than. So I'm going to have an open circle on the 7. It's not equal to, it's bigger than. And that because the k is bigger, my arrow will go to the larger values on the right. So it's bigger, it goes to the right for the big values. There we go. And that's solving multi-step equations. It's taking the skills that we learned earlier and putting them all together into a single problem.